two people who were once my closest confidants almost drove me to madness. Even after 8 years, the psychological trauma remains with me, casting a shadow on my life. As a 28-year-old woman, I shared this painful story only with my father and a therapist, keeping it a secret from others. But after getting to know your stories and feeling connected, I finally decided to share my experience with you. I feel both nervous and relieved when I finally share this deeply personal story and grateful for the anonymity that allows me to do so. The weight of this experience has consumed me, and I am eager to hear the opinions of other people who may have gone through something similar. Perhaps someone will be able to suggest how to speed up the recovery process, which, despite the past years, is painfully slow. This incident occurred during my student years, during the holidays, when I suddenly woke up in the dead of night and found that my ex-boyfriend was committing an act of infidelity. Many years have passed, but the memories of the incident that happened to my mother still haunt me. The trauma inflicted on me by this incident persisted for the rest of my life and led to a complete cessation of communication with both my mother and the person with whom it happened. Despite the fact that my mother is making attempts to restore the relationship, it is difficult for me to cope with my emotions and establish contact with her. Even now, her number remains blocked on my phone as a symbol of the emotional barriers that exist between us. In search of healing and forgiveness, I sought solace in therapy, devoting years to this process. Today, I find the strength to reflect on the stormy memories of our relationship. Despite the constant pain it causes, I find solace in telling my story as a form of therapy that alleviates the burden I've been carrying for the past 2 years. The profound impact of this experience has affected both my professional activities and my personal relationships. Although I tried to move forward and enter into new relationships, none of them were successful. My therapist suggests that my trust issues played a significant role in this. At some points, I believe that I am partly to blame for this myself, recognizing my lack of loyalty. It took me years of therapy to finally understand and come to terms with the complex dynamics that developed in my relationship with my ex-boyfriend. Looking back, I couldn't help feeling that his betrayal with my own mother was a form of revenge for my infidelity. Our paths crossed while studying at Georgia Tech University, where I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to play basketball. Looking back, I have to admit that I was attracted by the temptation to be one of the cool girls. Trying to rebel against my strict upbringing, especially against my mother, I made sacrifices and compromised with my own moral principles. At that time, I surrounded myself with a rather unconventional group of people, striving to free myself from the restrictions that defined my life. I wanted to live life to the fullest, and my thinking at that time was undoubtedly clouded. The last thing I wanted was for someone to dictate to me what was right and what wasn't, especially now that I was in college. It was like a newfound sense of freedom, an opportunity to explore life on your own terms. At this time, I was inclined to reckless behavior, seemingly oblivious to the consequences of my actions. Responsibility had no place in my mind, and I happily performed various stupid tricks. Dating has turned into a casual hobby fueled by public opinion that everyone should explore their capabilities. My friends and I believe that our attractiveness gave us the privilege to ensure that any man we chose treated us with special attention and admiration. With a strong sense of self-worth, backed up by youth, beauty, brightness, and athletic prowess, I entered life with an abundance of hope and a sense of liberation. Once I felt like the embodiment of fate itself, a real girl who, it would seem, has everything. But everything changed one day when I came across a heartbreaking scene when my vindictive and immature boyfriend committed a disgusting act with my own mother. Let me tell you a little about myself. At 5 feet 11 inches tall, I towered over most of my friends, and my slender figure had curves that emphasized a thin waist. Often guys showered me with compliments, offering to think about a career as a model. Considering my athletic physique, it is not surprising that I received a scholarship as a student. Being a talented athlete, I was not the only one in our relationship who had such abilities. My boyfriend was also an athlete, originally from a quaint town in North Carolina. Unlike his upbringing, I was from the sunny state of Florida. One fine morning, I found myself in the gym, where basketball practice was taking place. Unfamiliar with the situation due to a recent transfer from another educational institution, I was expecting a lonely morning workout, unaware of the possible presence of anyone on the basketball court. To my surprise, when I entered the gym, I saw the man who became my future boyfriend. He radiated politeness and undeniable charm, instantly riveting my attention. After exchanging greetings, we got carried away in conversation in between basketball games. Having entered into a friendly competition, we challenged each other. And after a few minutes, it seemed to me that we had known each other all our lives. That day we became incredibly close and enjoyed communicating with each other, creating an unforgettable impression, which can be considered our unofficial first date. It seemed that love overtook us at first sight, and all this during a short 20-minute workout. But our training went far beyond the planned 20 minutes, stretching for a wonderful 45 minutes, followed by 2 more hours of fascinating conversation. The time spent together was just extraordinary. He showered me with compliments, praising my ability to drive the ball and throw, but at the same time recognized his superiority on the court. As a recent student, he saw me for the first time, as he claimed to be familiar with most of the female basketball players. We didn't know yet that this meeting marked the beginning of a wonderful friendship that would later grow into something more. Our bond blossomed and grew into a blossoming relationship. Soon it began to seem that we were inseparable, constantly being next to each other, participating in joint activities and experiences. We were quickly talked about in college, and we gained a reputation as the new power couple in college. He had an impressive height, 6 feet 4 inches, slim build, and was a prominent member of the men's basketball team. Our bond grew rapidly, which prompted us to formalize our relationship. Our paths crossed in the second semester, and despite the usual circle of popular friends, I found solace in friendship with men, realizing the uniqueness of their views and the dynamics they brought to my life. Friendship with men had a noticeable impact on my life, as they tended to be more pragmatic and down-to-earth compared to my peers. Being in their company, I, as my friends jokingly noted, adopted some masculine traits. I began to feel free to take a seat when I was sitting, express my thoughts in a confident and assertive voice, eat any food, even pizza, without worrying about my weight, since I was always in good physical shape. Sometimes I allowed myself to show stupidity and enthusiasm, which amused and sometimes embarrassed my ex-boyfriend. There were times when I intentionally belched loudly in front of others, and it couldn't help but cause laughter. The carelessness and ease and such things sometimes annoyed my ex-boyfriend, as he was more reserved. But some mischievous part of me was amused by watching his charming embarrassment when his cheeks turned red, which was undoubtedly comical. Despite all these quirks, he loved me with all his soul, with all his flaws, and I reciprocated him. When the semester came to an end, we went on a trip to his parents in North Carolina, where I had the opportunity to meet his family. His parents, like my mother, adhered to strict religious beliefs and strict rules. Besides my boyfriend, he had 2 other brothers and a sister who were also part of this close-knit family. He had a close relationship with his parents, which sometimes caused me a note of jealousy. Being the only child of my mother, I could not help but feel envy, especially considering the remarriage of my father and the half-brothers and sisters who appeared in connection with this. Having survived my parents' divorce at the age of 18, I lived in different families as a teenager. Although I deeply loved both mom and dad, I must admit that I found more comfort and pleasure in communicating with my father. The strictness and difficult nature of my mother did not allow me to peacefully coexist with her. That's why I treasured the time I spent with my father. At the time when my parents were still together, it was noticeable that my father felt a certain fear of my mother since she had a strict and critical character, always found flaws in everything he did. In her eyes, he could never be worthy. At that moment, I resented my mother, believing that my father left because of her constant nagging. But over time, I came across a rumor that shed light on another truth. It turned out that my father was unfaithful, as a result of which my mother eventually kicked him out of the house. It was a revelation that shattered my preconceived notions and forced me to face a reality that I had previously refused to acknowledge. A few months after my parents' divorce, my father found his love again and got married. As a result, I have 3 half-brothers and a half-sister. On the other hand, my mother decided not to get married and focused her energies on the career of a school principal, devoting most of her time to supporting and mentoring her students. Now let's talk about my ex-boyfriend. The main problem of our relationship was his constant need for control. He tried to dictate who I should be friends with, felt uncomfortable when I spent time with other guys. In addition, he unfairly judged my girlfriends, considering them promiscuous, based on unfounded stereotypes. He often listened to stories from his friends and then set himself the task of preventing me from spending time with his basketball teammates when he wasn't around. I was very upset by this behavior because I saw it as an opportunity to improve my basketball skills. I tried to explain to him that playing with guys actually helps me improve more than playing with girls. And it was true. Moreover, many of my friends who play basketball follow the same practice. But my boyfriend did not understand the value of such an experience and continued to impose his erroneous restrictions. My boyfriend often felt a sense of jealousy, fearing that I was getting too close to my male friends. Although I can admit that there were times when the boundaries between friendship and something more blurred, I always kept clear boundaries out of respect for our relationship. I openly told my boyfriend that my friends are fond of some athletes, believing that honesty and transparency will strengthen our trust. But instead of trusting me, he, on the contrary, suspected me of misconduct, although these girlfriends were not connected with him by any romantic relationship. In a story different from mine, there have been cases when my friends have had intimate relationships with several players at the same time. For them, it was purely a sporting interest without any emotional attachments. Despite the influence of friends who believed that youth was an excuse to explore and have fun as much as possible, I remained faithful to my boyfriend. However, in my student years, I admit, the temptation to change came to my mind more than once. Under the influence of my peers, it began to seem to me that I was missing out on certain opportunities. Constant pressure from friends convinced me that I wanted more thrills in my personal life. They often tried to set me up with other guys, talked about who was in love with me. These thoughts and conversations sometimes came to my mind during intimate moments with my boyfriend, but it didn't go beyond fantasies. Although my boyfriend satisfied me emotionally and physically, I couldn't help but imagine a wider selection of attractive, muscular guys that I fantasized about. Despite the fact that I was in a serious relationship, many people continued to flirt with me. I must admit that, as already mentioned, I was pleased with this attention. This gave me the feeling that I was somehow missing the exciting moments of my heyday because my student years flew by unnoticed. Although I was tempted, I never thought about cheating on my boyfriend and did not look for what, in my opinion, I lacked. My boyfriend was really wonderful, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was missing in my life. This uncertainty even led me to think. I began to have doubts about the fact that we maintain a relationship with him. I was looking for reasons why I should break up, but to my horror, I could not find any significant ones. He was practically perfect in every way. He satisfied my needs and desires, showed unfailing loyalty and care. Apart from the desire to be desired by other men, I had no good reason to end the relationship. If I left, I would lose all the beautiful things that my boyfriend gave me. I felt confident and comfortable in his presence. He not only provided me with financial support, but also did everything possible to ensure my comfort. Although he had attractive qualities, he was not prone to casual relationships, which allowed me to believe that he would not change. But I began to resent him for his lack of interest in other women. Despite his controlling nature, he still trusted me. This trust weighed on me because I felt guilty and unworthy, knowing that I often fantasize about other men. He even shared his phone password with me and gave me an extra key to his apartment so I could check it whenever I wanted. He always looked at things more broadly and saw the whole picture as a whole. He was already carefully planning our future after college, imagining a life full of beautiful children and a wonderful home. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always focused on the future and rarely lived in the present moment. It seemed to me that I was meeting a man similar to my father, who was always considering the consequences of his every action. Although being around a person who has a purpose and direction was amazing, at some moments it seemed monotonous. At this time, I began to compare my relationship with the relationships of my friends. Watching others seemingly enjoying life, I couldn't shake the feeling of alienation. It seemed that life was passing by me, leaving a painful feeling of emptiness. While my friends arranged numerous dates with different men, both in college and on the internet, and even went to elite restaurants, I felt deprived. Their experience was that they entered into intimate relationships with several partners for a month, almost like in competition with each other. This was the norm in my student years. I couldn't help but feel detached from the excitement that surrounded my friends. It was not only about great dates, but also about shared experiences and stories that they told. It seemed that everyone except me was having a good time. Being in a permanent relationship, I felt like an outcast. My daily routine has become predictable and unsatisfying. As a rule, it consisted of attending classes, snacking, basketball practice, and the rest of the day spent with my boyfriend. But this monotony gave me no peace and I wanted something more. And then one day, I was invited to a party and I was happy to join my friends. We all radiated self-confidence together, towering over others with our tall stature and sporting high-heeled shoes. Our sporting achievements were well known and this added to our coolness. We were selective in communication because our status attracted the attention of both men and women. The party we attended was hosted by one of our college mates. Out of excitement, I shared this news with my boyfriend, to which I received only objections. Unfortunately, he had to go out of town and would not be able to accompany me. Feeling insecure, I noticed that my boyfriend resisted my presence at the party. His objections struck a chord with me. I felt insulted and doubted his motives. It seemed to me that he was being selfish and trying to control my choice. I was firmly convinced that I didn't need his permission, but out of respect for our relationship, I informed him of my plans. In response to this, he stated that he did not mind attending the party without him, which only increased my disappointment. Succumbing to emotions, I impulsively started a fight with him, deciding to defend my independence. Despite the discord, I came to the party as planned. At the party, I found myself surrounded by many familiar faces from the college basketball team my boyfriend played for. I've talked to most of them before, and they were well aware of my relationship with a guy. Interestingly, some of these guys even met with my friends who accompanied me that evening. As the evening went on, my single girlfriend started talking to different guys, and I felt pretty isolated and bored. When I found myself in the midst of a lively crowd, a feeling of regret began to creep in. It seemed that my presence at the party prevented me from fully immersing myself in the celebration. Being in a permanent relationship, I could not get rid of the feeling that everyone around me knew about my status, and as a result, I experienced a lack of attention from the guys present. So I sat quietly sipping my drink and idly flipping through my phone. But suddenly, a charming stranger struck up a conversation with me with whom I had never crossed paths before. It is noteworthy that he did not belong to the basketball team of our school since I was familiar with everyone. At that moment, I didn't know that this acquaintance would develop into something unexpected. It turned out that the attractive stranger who approached me at the party was the cousin of one of my boyfriend's teammates who was going to transfer to our college. From the moment our eyes met, I felt an undeniable attraction to him. Alcohol may have played a role, but I couldn't deny my desire. When he started flirting with me, I should have immediately told him that I was in a serious relationship. But curiosity got the better of me and I wanted to see how far it would go, mistakenly believing that I could stop it before it went too far. As our conversation deepened, I became more and more torn, not wanting him to find out the truth about my status in the relationship. Feeling a deep need for communication, I felt that I was drawn to this intriguing person. Our communication developed rapidly. We flirted and exchanged caustic remarks. When he started touching me, I instinctively recoiled, realizing that my friends were around us. Sensing my indecision, he offered to dance away from prying eyes, assuring me that there was nothing wrong with that. I reluctantly agreed, and we headed to a secluded corner of the party, away from prying eyes. Thoughts raced through my head as we started dancing together. At first, I felt discomfort, which made him slightly retreat. But the desire between us grew and we were close again. We happily danced together, our bodies intertwined on the dance floor. Laughter filled the air until his attention was distracted by a tap on his shoulder. He was distracted for a moment, entering into a conversation with one of the guys. It looks like he was aware of my relationship. When he returned, a subtle change in his behavior caught my attention, and I felt a sense of disappointment. I didn't want the bright energy to fade. I wanted to prolong the pleasure. Sensing my desire to change the situation, he caught my signal and offered to go outside to get some fresh air. Without hesitation, I agreed. And when we went outside, a feeling of peace descended on us. Feeling hungry, he kindly offered us a snack. He mentioned that his cousin's apartment, where he now lives, is just a few blocks away, a 5-minute walk away. Looking forward to a late dinner or a visit to the nearest restaurant, I was amazed when he suggested going to his cousin's instead. Curiosity got the better of me and I agreed, thinking it would be a unique experience. Unfortunately, out of excitement, I forgot to warn my friends about our spontaneous hike. Glancing at the phone, I noticed a missed call from my boyfriend, a reminder of our long-standing quarrel. The thought of answering his call bothered me, especially since the tension between us still persisted. I couldn't help thinking that my boyfriend was trying to control me. The last thing I wanted was for him to dictate my actions, especially in the presence of a new acquaintance. Imagining his reaction if he heard a man's voice in the background, I knew he would be furious. I didn't want to extinguish the positive energy that had arisen between me and a new acquaintance. To calm my feelings, I reassured myself that there could be nothing but friendship with the person I had just met. He was genuinely persuasive but not too insistent, and there was no subtext in his invitation. He just expressed a desire to demonstrate his culinary skills by cooking dinner for me at his cousin's. Having lived in this apartment for more than a month, he felt comfortable and at ease. To be honest, I sincerely believed that we were just going there to have dinner together. At least, that's what I told myself. There was trust in him, and that calmed me down. Although I didn't have any obvious expectations from this evening, I couldn't deny that there were some thoughts lurking in the back of my mind. But when he came to his apartment, he surprised me by turning on an incendiary dance composition in the house style. While he was cooking something skillfully in the kitchen, he thoughtfully served me a glass of wine and some delicious buns as a snack. Then he switched the music to soothing jazz, creating a relaxing and enchanting atmosphere. His choice of music echoed my preferences, and I couldn't help but express my surprise. I playfully noted that I didn't expect him to be a jazz fan, judging by the impression he made. A smile danced on his lips as he inquired about my guess. I admitted that he just doesn't look like a jazz lover. In response, he playfully admitted that he was really full of surprises. At that moment, he took a step towards me and held out his hand, silently inviting me to make a reciprocal gesture. A wave of shyness washed over me. A strange feeling, considering that I didn't hold back at the party. Deep down, I knew that crossing this line would inevitably entail consequences, forever changing the dynamics of our relationship. I clearly understood that the moment our hands touched, everything would change. Doubts and indecision crept into my mind, making me doubt the current situation. The thought that I might betray my boyfriend weighed heavily on my conscience, prompting me to leave his apartment as soon as possible. But before I could finish these thoughts, he abruptly brought me out of my mental turmoil. Grabbing my hand tightly, he dragged me to the center of the living room and forced me to dance with him. I tried to protest, but it was inconclusive. Part of me secretly rejoiced at his assertiveness, appreciating that he took the situation into his own hands. We started dancing, at first keeping our distance from each other, but with each passing minute, he gradually reduced this distance until we were pressed against each other. The whirlwind of emotions left me no time to react or even think about my next actions. His lips reached my neck, causing an exciting mixture of sensations to sweep through my body. A chill ran down my spine, mixed with delight, reminiscent of the first intimate minutes I shared with my boyfriend. Time seemed to slip away. The boundaries between us blurred, and before I really realized what was happening, a sense of urgency forced us to take off our clothes. It was as if all the pent-up desire that had been accumulating in me for so long suddenly burst out, overcoming all attempts at self-control. In the heat of passion, rational thoughts faded into the background, absorbed by the sharpness of the moment. It was a night of unbridled passion when instincts prevailed over reason. I didn't think about my boyfriend once. The temptation of the present absorbed all my thoughts and actions. It was only after I stopped that I was overcome with guilt. Afterwards, he insisted that I stay while he finished cooking, but I couldn't get rid of the discomfort. The burden of committing a terrible act lay on my conscience. I wanted to leave the place where I committed this offense as soon as possible. The weight of my boyfriend's betrayal consumed me. He did not possess any outstanding qualities, did not meet the inflated expectations. Anticipation was the only source of pleasure, which made the meeting superficial and meaningless. I wanted to create as much space as possible between myself and this situation. Unable to stand the shame, I decided not to go alone, but to go home by taxi. Looking into the phone, I found a flurry of messages from friends and missed calls. Apparently, their concern for me reached threatening proportions since I did not warn them about my departure. I sneaked out of the club unnoticed to be with this unfamiliar person. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed a missed call from my boyfriend. Fear gripped me when I thought about the possible options. What if he already knows? Did someone give away my secret date? What if witnesses saw us leaving the club together? Contrary to the stories of my friends, the reality turned out to be quite different from what I expected. It was an empty, insignificant meeting, just a fleeting contact for one night. Perhaps I was not adapted to such experiences, or maybe because of the rare participation in them. I was not used to them. The quick transition from dating a stranger to being in his bed in just 5 hours was a remarkable anecdote, but not one worth cherishing. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that he treats me as an object devoid of the tenderness and affection that I found in my boyfriend. It dawned on me that this is the essence of a one-night stand, the lack of love and connection. On reflection, I regret to admit that some part of me, disgusted, found some attraction in this. This was my unbridled side, which was attracted to the risk and excitement of potential danger. It had its own adventurous mania, which fascinated me. Sitting in a taxi, I fraudulently called my friends, coming up with the reason for my sudden departure: illness. Later, I found out that they had witnessed me leaving the club with him, and I was overcome with shame. I couldn't bring myself to admit it. I'm afraid it might affect my relationship with my boyfriend. Deep down, I knew that this was not an excuse, and it only increased my remorse. But this weak excuse is the best I could come up with. I didn't know yet that some of my boyfriend's teammates, including his cousin, witnessed me leaving the club with my new acquaintance. When I was returning home, I was seized with anxiety and thoughts about what would have happened if. What if they think I had something else with this stranger? What if the rumors get to my boyfriend? Deep down, I knew that this would inevitably lead to a disastrous outcome when my boyfriend found out the truth. That evening, I didn't answer my boyfriend's calls, fearing that one of his friends saw me. Eventually, fatigue got the better of me, and I reluctantly went to bed around 2 or 3 in the morning. The next morning, around 6 o'clock, the phone rang, and to my horror, my boyfriend was on the line. He asked me about the events of the previous night, causing fear in me. Trying to get away from the truth, I pretended that I didn't understand what he was talking about. But he persisted, telling me the name of my companion that night. I was amazed because at that moment, I could not remember his name. Although he introduced himself the night before, it completely slipped my mind. The realization that I don't even remember the name of my love partner threw me into a daze and fear. I categorically denied my knowledge of the person my boyfriend was talking about, claiming that I had no idea who he was. But my boyfriend continued to enlighten me, informing me that this is the cousin of one of his teammates. At that moment, I reluctantly admitted that I went outside with him to get some fresh air. To my horror, my boyfriend told me that this guy bragged about sleeping with me, and he even has photo evidence of me leaving his cousin's apartment. In an instant, I experienced shock and disbelief, realizing that I had been exposed as a traitor. The severity of the situation was crushing. I was speechless, unable to utter a word. Thoughts were spinning in my head about directing my anger at this stupid teammate or at the one who reported him. I believe that the guilt I felt at that moment should have conveyed my sincere remorse. I apologized profusely, stressing that it was a gross mistake on my part. The tremor in his voice when he angrily hurled his insults at me caused a deep resonance and great sadness in me. The barrage of hurtful words made me doubt that I really deserved such harsh criticism because it was just a mistake on my part. I really wanted him to understand the remorse that weighed heavily on my heart. I offered to continue the conversation in person when he returns from a business trip the next day. But to my amazement, he informed me that he had already arrived and offered to discuss this issue in the nearest random cafe. Apparently, a teammate informed him about this the day before, which prompted him to abruptly interrupt the trip to resolve this issue. It is worth noting that the conversation will take place in a public setting. I didn't want to discuss our personal issues in a public setting because I didn't want to put them on public display. Instead, I suggested we meet at home after class to talk more intimately. When he came, I tried to find out the extent of his awareness before confessing, hoping to minimize the additional pain I might cause him. To my surprise, he was already aware of everything, and it became clear that I had been betrayed by my partner's cousin in a love affair. The man with whom I had an intimate relationship shamelessly boasted about our intimate relationship and even took a picture of me leaving his apartment without my knowledge. To my horror, I saw that photos of me leaving my partner's apartment were being distributed all over the university campus. It became obvious that the person I was having an affair with was incredibly immature. I realized that for him, I was just a conquest, a trophy to show off. He shamelessly boasted that he had slept with a girl who had a boyfriend just 5 hours after they met. The whole situation was incredibly humiliating. I couldn't help but regret that I had so easily succumbed to the persuasions of a man who turned out to be such a disgusting person. It was already impossible to deny the truth, and I plucked up the courage and confessed everything to my partner, sincerely asking him for forgiveness. I humbly asked him for forgiveness. I said I was fully aware that I was wrong, and I would like him to understand that I was naive and felt that this terrible person took advantage of me. The sadness in my boyfriend's eyes broke my heart. He repeatedly expressed his embarrassment at the fact that his teammates became aware of my infidelity and the severity of the consequences began to be felt. I did not imagine that the situation could escalate so much, and I allowed myself impulsive actions. During our conversation, it was clear that he was genuinely offended, but at the same time retained amazing composure. He did not raise his voice and did not attack me, which I expected from him. Instead, he calmly expressed his deep sense of humiliation. He asked how he deserved such a disgrace, repeatedly emphasizing his unwavering love for me and loyalty throughout our relationship. Despite countless temptations from other women, he never succumbed to their persuasions. The realization of this weighed heavily on me, and I could not get rid of a feeling of deep guilt and remorse. Seeing the sincere pain I caused him, I offered my most sincere apologies, admitting that this was all I could do at that moment. I desperately conveyed my fear of losing him and asked him to guide me on the path of restoring his trust. But in response, he made a heartbreaking revelation. He stated that he could not accept my apology and expressed uncertainty about continuing the relationship as he believes that he will never be able to trust me again. The weight of his words became even heavier when he said that almost all of his teammates now know about this situation, which changed the dynamics of our communication. He confessed that he could no longer walk next to me or be in my presence, and it was a very painful realization that left me shattered. I experienced an irresistible feeling that I was being torn apart, as if a lever was being pulled in different directions. A deep sense of emptiness engulfed me, as if I couldn't imagine life without him. Remorse for betraying his trust weighed heavily on my conscience. I felt that his emotions were suppressed, hidden. His silence worried me. I was waiting for some kind of reaction from him. I wanted him to express his anger, to speak out against my actions. His calmness only increased the depth of his sadness, although tears did not decorate his eyes. I wanted him to feel something, to react somehow. In moments of despair, I even begged him to inflict physical pain on me in order to vent the pent-up emotions that he kept in himself. Hoping to ease the pain and save our relationship, I reflected that drastic measures could bring relief. Just the thought of losing him was unbearable, and I couldn't imagine life without him. In a fit of anger, he left without answering my calls for 2 agonizing days. Despite all the worries, deep down, I believed that his love for me had not faded. I knew that even in the midst of chaos, he cared. Based on this, I made a conscious decision to give him the necessary space, refraining from excessive persistence. For a whole week, I resisted the urge to call or write, even though all my insides craved his presence. And then one day, I plucked up the courage and came to his game, as in the good old days, and warmly supported him. After the game, our eyes met, and he noticed my presence again. But I didn't dare approach him at that moment, knowing that his teammates were nearby. Instead, I waited patiently until we were both in the parking lot, and only then began the conversation. I sincerely congratulated him on his outstanding performance, and his expression showed that he was happy to see me. Summing up, we can say that our communication led us to his apartment, where we shared an intimate moment. The status of our relationship remained uncertain, with lingering ambiguity. However, I didn't want to end the relationship prematurely. I strove for harmony and avoided excessive assertiveness. Time passed, and after a few weeks, we faced a lot of problems and obstacles. Despite our frequent meetings, he constantly avoided appearing with me in public. It seemed that everyone in college knew about my affair, judging by the way they looked at me. In order not to embarrass my boyfriend, I tried to avoid certain events and not to appear with him in public. Our relationship remained uncertain, except for intimate moments. Breaking into his apartment became commonplace, and we got the opportunity to retire for physical communication. I was burdened with the weight of condemnation from others. But, to my surprise, their opinion was not as condemnatory as I imagined. Moreover, I began to feel attention from other men, as if they were attracted by my presence. I found out that other guys in college started coming up to me, as if they were molesting me. Uncertainty clouded my thoughts, whether their interest was caused by the assumption that I was no longer with my boyfriend, or whether they perceived me as easily accessible. However, I didn't really like the attention I was getting. Even my boyfriend couldn't help but notice the increased attention to me in college, and made comments about it. At that time, I could not understand whether this increased attention was for the benefit or harm of our relationship. Moreover, I felt a change in my boyfriend's behavior. He became more and more secretive with me. He began to hide a lot from me, creating an atmosphere of secrecy. It seemed that he had withdrawn into himself, not wanting to be vulnerable with me anymore. I thought it took time and patience to regain his trust, and I was ready to wait for this opportunity. But to my surprise, fate decreed otherwise. To my surprise, my partner in a love relationship was going to enter our college in the next semester. He was transferring from another university and was waiting for the activation of his scholarship. Our paths inevitably crossed, and I tried not to look into his eyes, feeling deeply uncomfortable. But my boyfriend surprised me with his reaction, saying that he could not consider my partner in a love relationship fully responsible for our situation. Since this guy with whom I had an affair was a freshman in college and was not familiar with his true nature, my boyfriend did not have any hostile feelings for him. I couldn't help but think that my boyfriend's look was somewhat naive, given that my lover openly bragged about his connection with a girl in a serious relationship. Nevertheless, I decided to accept my boyfriend's trust, finding solace in the fact that he is ready to give our relationship another chance. He advised me to give time to heal our wounds, hoping that things would get better over time. Deep down, I felt grateful that he had agreed to take me back, although some part of me could not get rid of the lingering doubts. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that he was just using me as a hidden partner, avoiding public recognition of our relationship. Despite these concerns, I tried not to dwell on them. I was spurred on by the determination to return our relationship to its former state. At the end of the semester, my boyfriend and I planned to come to my mom's house to introduce him to her. I was afraid that Mom wouldn't approve of it. But deep down, I believed that my boyfriend had the qualities that any parent would like to see in a partner for their child. I doubted if my boyfriend would agree to go with me because of my past infidelity, as I wasn't sure if his feelings for me remained the same. But I was pleasantly surprised when he agreed to come with me, considering it as a hope for the restoration of our relationship. His consent was of great importance to me because I knew how much he valued the time spent with his family. It was especially significant that he agreed to visit my mother with me, given that she lives in northern Florida. My mom lives in the immediate vicinity of Georgia and works as the principal of a local high school. She makes great efforts and devotes a lot of time to her work. Her social circle consists mainly of people from her place of work and parishioners of her church, although she does not take an active part in the life of the church and visits it only on Sundays. After the end of the semester, my boyfriend and I went to visit her using his car. When we arrived, my mother was looking forward to us at her house, noticeably delighted to see me. I noticed that since our last meeting, she has gained several kilograms. It's been 6 months since I last saw my mother. She looked a lot like Roseanne Barr in her heyday, but she didn't have a sense of humor. I inherited my tall stature from my father. Mom rarely smiled, so her beaming expression at the sight of me testified to genuine happiness. Seeing her smile was very important to me. At that time, my mother was 45 years old, and by her appearance and clothes, it was unmistakably possible to determine that she was a school principal. I introduced her to my boyfriend, and her joy for me was palpable. Taking my boyfriend and me firmly by the hands, Mom led us to the house, not suspecting that we still need to bring things into the house. Sensing my indecision, my boyfriend convinced me to go ahead, assuring me that he would cope with the task of carrying luggage. He advised me to spend time with my mom. I remember how my mother smiled when she heard his caring words. She praised him for his gentlemanly character, which was manifested in the way he took me by the hand and led me into the house. In the kitchen, Mom thoughtfully prepared some of my favorite dishes, and this gesture warmed my heart. We settled down at the dining table, talking and catching up while my boyfriend diligently brought my things into the house. Since he wasn't familiar with the layout, I had to take him to my room. I vaguely remember a moment of playfulness between us when we were alone in the house, but our intimate moment was interrupted by the cry of my mother, who called us to dinner. We hurried to put ourselves in order, dressed quickly and headed to the dining room. Knowing my mother's restraint, I expected quiet and peaceful gatherings. We were probably the first guests my mom had received in months, not counting her sister and my grandmother. She never liked to have people in her house. After a hearty dinner, I felt full and tired. The evening darkness was descending on us. Politely apologizing, I informed my boyfriend that I was going to go to bed. He was surprised to notice that it was still early, probably around 8 p.m., if my memory serves me right. But I explained that the day had been long and tiring and I needed a rest. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I found that my boyfriend was missing next to me. Drawn by curiosity, I followed the sound of laughter coming from the living room, where I found my mother and her boyfriend engaged in a cheerful conversation. Their laughter filled the room, which was rare for my usually reserved mom, who laughed heartily only in the presence of her sister. Watching their communication, I felt a surge of happiness from the realization that my mom genuinely likes my boyfriend and that he is able to bring her such joy. It was as if the misdeeds of my past romance had been forgiven and forgotten and replaced by a newfound sense of harmony in our relationship. I am very sorry that I betrayed him, because he was a really kind person. When I woke up and entered the living room, I saw that they were both sitting on the couch and talking enthusiastically, watching TV. Surprisingly, they were wearing the same clothes as when I went to bed. I joined them, and together we continued to watch TV until 1 o'clock in the morning, when Mom decided it was time to go to bed. I sat down next to my boyfriend on the sofa, and soon he peacefully dozed off, resting his head on my lap. I believe that I fell asleep quite late that night, around 4 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up around 10 o'clock in the morning, I found that both my boyfriend and my mom were missing. Feeling a little puzzled, I decided to eat porridge while waiting for them. Just as I was eating, they both came back through the front door looking a little sweaty. To my surprise, my mom was jogging with my boyfriend. To see my mom doing physical exercises was truly unprecedented, because I had never seen her do sports before. It seemed inconceivable to me that someone could successfully convince her to do this. Although she wasn't overweight, it certainly wouldn't hurt to lose a few pounds. In fact, her resemblance to Roseanne Barr was simply amazing. It is noteworthy that she even wore training leggings, which further emphasized her newfound commitment to fitness. I was completely unaware of my mom's hidden interest until my boyfriend managed to persuade her to go for a run. I was very amused when they surprised me during breakfast and we all laughed together. Watching Mom's newfound happiness, I should have realized that this would be one of the few joyful moments that we would experience together over the next 8 years. In the evening of the same day, I expected to spend time with my boyfriend, but he was nowhere to be found. When I got through to him, he admitted that he was watching the stars with my mom. Stargazers hold a special place in my mom's heart, so it's not surprising that she managed to convince him to take part in this entertainment. I had conflicting emotions because I was planning to spend time with my boyfriend, but I couldn't help but perceive my mother's invitation as a gesture of recognition towards him. Considering that she left stargazing for the closest people, I decided not to wait for him, but to go to bed. In the end, he went to bed and I didn't notice how they came back. The next morning, an unexpected and peculiar incident occurred. On this day, Mom decided to dress very provocatively while in the house. She was walking around the kitchen where she was preparing breakfast for me and a guy in a revealing dressing gown without a bra and underwear, and its sagging parts were clearly visible. I couldn't help but notice her revealing outfit, and I was sure that my boyfriend also noticed it. The situation was certainly awkward, but both Mom and the guy didn't seem to be hurt at all, behaved as if everything was in perfect order. It would be very inconvenient for me to point out to her the need to dress more modestly in her own home. Our relationship was not built on such dynamics. She was one of those people who usually tell me that I need to cover up, so the situation looked very strange. In order to maintain a sense of normality, I pretended not to notice anything and hoped that this was just a strange phenomenon that would not happen again if I did not dwell on it. But that morning was a significant sign that there might have been something between us. That morning, my boyfriend and I were stunned by my mom's behavior. She seemed to be treating him like the head of the family, and that alerted me. But I never imagined that they could have an affair. Later, my boyfriend and I went to visit friends, and I completely discarded the strange morning events. Returning home closer to midnight, we found that Mom was still in the living room, engrossed in the TV. It seemed that she was waiting for our return before going to bed. Upon arrival, I expected my boyfriend to go with me to the bedroom to get some rest. However, to my surprise, he stayed with Mom in the living room. And I went to the bathroom to take a shower and get ready for bed. A few hours later, when I woke up, I found that my boyfriend was not with me, which was reminiscent of the previous night. When I went to the bathroom, faint sounds of moaning and the TV came from the living room. The volume of the TV was deafening when I finished visiting the bathroom and returned to the bedroom. But an incomprehensible desire made me head to the living room, driven by curiosity to get to the truth. When I entered the living room from the hallway, a wave of anticipation swept over me. I didn't know what was waiting for me. I didn't know yet that this unexpected sight would change the course of my life indefinitely. My eyes widened in disbelief and a cry involuntarily escaped my lips. The sight of mom and boyfriend was incomprehensible and left me in a state of shock that will stay with me for the rest of my life. My boyfriend and my mom found themselves in a compromising situation, caught off guard. She was in a nightgown and he was shirtless, wearing only boxers. As soon as my screams reached their ears, mom abruptly pulled away from him, clearly alarmed. I witnessed the undeniable truth. They were engaged in intimacy. It was obvious that this was not some kind of prank or innocent act, but a real intimate relationship. My mom stared at me, stunned, covering her mouth with her hand, and my boyfriend hurriedly tried to get dressed. I felt very dizzy and lost consciousness. When I came to myself, I found that my mother was hugging me. It turned out that I lost consciousness, and to my horror, my boyfriend was not there. When I woke up, mom was in turmoil, tears were streaming down her face. It seemed that I was unconscious for several minutes. She expressed her remorse, admitting that it was an unfortunate mistake. But at that moment, I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. I was focused solely on the whereabouts of my boyfriend, and if I crossed paths with him, my anger was so strong that I could harm him. That evening, I quickly packed my things. Wanting to escape from the confined space of my mother's house, my boyfriend, having shown cowardice, has already disappeared in his car. Desperate to find support, I called my friend and informed her of my imminent arrival to her. Finding myself without transport since I left my car at college, I decided to call an Uber. The goal was twofold: to take me to a friend where I could find solace and cry out tears on a sympathetic shoulder. Despite my desire to contact him, my boyfriend did not respond, and I was left with an unsatisfied desire to talk to him. I longed for some kind of solution to the situation, and time passed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. I hoped that he would take the initiative, turn to me, and sincerely ask for forgiveness. After all, I thought it was his responsibility, not mine. The severity of this situation haunted me, forcing me to abandon my studies for a long time. That semester, I was unable to return to college, overwhelmed with a sense of shame, humiliation, and deep despair. This experience left me with a deep scar and emotional trauma. Having found refuge with my father, I told him about my problems. To my relief, he generously arranged psychotherapy sessions for me. In the end, 3 years after a serious incident in one day, I plucked up the courage and returned to the Georgia Institute of Technology to get my degree. Unfortunately, by this time, I had lost my scholarship and all my friends had already graduated from university, including my spineless ex-boyfriend. Despite the fact that 8 years have passed, I am still on a difficult path of recovery. But I am taking active measures to restore relations with my mother. She gives me a helping hand. I realize that in the end, I need to confess my feelings for her, since it is impossible to keep anger in myself indefinitely. After all, she's still my mother. Similarly, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that my ex-boyfriend was using a lonely and vulnerable woman. From time to time, I find him on Facebook and I resent his apparent happiness with his wife and 3 children. It seems that he quickly moved on, and I continue to struggle with the mental pain that he caused me and which does not go away even after 8 years. It's hard for me to let him go and move on. I assure you, I have made an effort to do this. From time to time, dark thoughts come into my head. Thoughts of finding him and ending his wife's life. I can't get rid of the feeling that the children she has now should have been mine, and he deprived me of everything. I remained only an empty likeness of my former self. And although I hope that I will never put these thoughts into practice, the pain I feel has not subsided yet, as if it happened only yesterday. I'm a 41-year-old man. My wife is 29 years old. Our joint union began in May 2017 when we met on the internet. Before meeting her, I had a difficult and traumatic relationship from which I managed to recover. I didn't know that my wife was also in a difficult relationship with her ex, who was being abused. And although at first I didn't know about these circumstances, over time the truth came out showing what a misfortune she had experienced and how wrongly she behaved during that period. What at first seemed like a casual summer affair suddenly turned into something deeper and more meaningful. As we got to know each other, I discovered one intriguing aspect of her life. She worked in law enforcement as a correctional officer. Her profession seemed interesting to me, especially considering her bright appearance. I couldn't help but ask how she ended up in a men's prison. To my surprise, she explained that she works in a high-security prison and her current position does not involve direct communication with prisoners. Curiosity got the better of me and I couldn't resist asking if she had ever thought about choosing a profession more appropriate to her appearance. To my surprise, she explained that her current job in a correctional facility is not only financially beneficial, but also presents a unique challenge that she would like to cope with. Her determination and drive made her even more captivating in my eyes. Our intimate life together was simply exciting. She had a bold and adventurous character, always striving for new sensations in our bedroom. Traditional positions quickly lost their appeal for her as she craved variety and enjoyment. Her preferences tended towards more intense contacts. I even noticed her aggression in bed. Looking back, I realized that I should have seen this as a potential wake-up call. But at that time, we weren't officially related to each other yet and I just enjoyed it. In the modern world, it is not uncommon to meet people with unique preferences and excesses, so I did not attach much importance to this. In fact, I genuinely enjoyed exploring our desires. Given our significant age difference, it was obvious to me that she was not seeking commitment or the traditional way of creating a relationship. Despite my doubts, there was an undeniable connection between us. We couldn't ignore the deep connection that seemed to transcend all prejudices and expectations. Despite the difficulties associated with the age difference, we decided to take a leap of faith and she moved in with me. It was like the beginning of our happy life, or so I thought. From May 2017, our relationship blossomed until one day in September 2017, I came across her open browser which indicated her interest in group dating. Scared, I asked her about it. She reassured me that it was just a fantasy and she didn't intend to do it. I decided to dismiss her, realizing that each of us has our own fantasies and desires. At first, I didn't see anything reprehensible in the fact that a partner has fantasies, since this is a natural part of human nature. But I couldn't help but worry, especially because of her penchant for pushing boundaries. A few months later, during intimacy, she expressed a desire to open our relationship, explaining that she would like to explore intimate relationships with other people. I answered this honestly, stating that it does not meet my own desires and needs. In the end, I made the difficult decision to end the relationship, realizing that her insatiable desire to constantly seek new sensations is incompatible with my own values and desires. After parting, we amicably parted in different directions while maintaining friendly relations. There was no enmity between us, which allowed us to coexist peacefully. But soon after our breakup, she quickly entered into a new relationship with another person. As a result, our communication came to naught. Suddenly, 9 months later, she suddenly turned to me, telling me about the injuries she had received as a result of abuse by her boyfriend. It became obvious that her partner was very violent at the time, but she continued to maintain the relationship, hoping that he would change someday. These events reached a terrifying climax on one of the fateful nights when a heated argument took place between them, which escalated into a brutal physical attack. The degree of brutality of the attack was so high that it almost took the girl's life. Fortunately, vigilant neighbors intervened in the case, who immediately turned to the authorities, which led to the arrest of her partner. As the truth was revealed, it turned out that he had several criminal offenses and he was even a prisoner in the prison where she worked. But the details of this connection will be clarified later. In the midst of this traumatic ordeal, she turned to me for support and we resumed communication via text messages. Worrying about her, I visited her repeatedly in the hospital where she was being treated, so that she would know that she was not alone at this difficult time. During her recovery, we maintained regular contacts until the moment of her discharge from the hospital. After her discharge, we continued to communicate, gradually restoring emotional and physical connection. However, despite the moments of intimacy, we were never able to fully reconcile because of my uncertainty about her position on an open relationship. I made it clear that my point of view on this issue remains unchanged and that I am not ready for such a relationship. In response, she stated that she had satisfied her curiosity about a free relationship and was now ready to devote herself to me and live with me. Despite her assurances, I remained cautious and indecisive, realizing that our different views on this fundamental aspect of the relationship could lead to conflicts in the future. She expressed her sympathy for what we once shared and eventually got pregnant and decided to move in with me. In December 2019, our son was born, and 4 months later, she returned to her duties. To provide the child with proper care, we made schedules. She worked at night, I worked during the day. Thus, one of us could always look after his son. Besides, we hired a babysitter when we were both busy. By August 2019, we had taken a step towards engagement. We took a step forward and got married. But less than 6 months later, I felt that something was wrong. My wife began to show excessive irritation to me for no apparent reason. In addition, she became unreliable in terms of punctuality, was often late at work, and behaved strangely. It made me question her suitability as a mother. There were times when I was at work and the nanny called me and informed me that my wife did not show up to relieve her of her duties. In such a situation, I had to leave work early, since my wife's work in prison forbade her to carry a phone with her. I found myself in a difficult situation when my wife parked her car near the building where she worked for a long time, from 8 to 12 hours. Where was her phone number, as a result of which I could not contact her? When I asked her about it, she apologized and gave explanations, claiming that she was forced to work extra time and her job did not allow her to leave at any moment. We discussed the possibility of finding alternative work options that would be more in line with her duties as a young mother. Unfortunately, after studying various options, we found that at that time, there were no suitable vacancies for her. Despite our attempt to find a job that would match her current income, we were unable to find a suitable option. As a result, my wife decided to remain in her position as a correctional officer, as this provided the financial stability we needed. But on St. Patrick's Day, I noticed that she was spending time with colleagues, demonstrating dismissive behavior towards me and essentially ignoring my presence. Feeling out of place, I started talking to her about it, questioning her actions, and even directly asking if there was anyone else in her life. She categorically denied such a possibility, considering my fears unfounded and exaggerated. In the midst of this emotional exchange, I asked her directly if she regretted our decision to get married. As we overcame the difficulties of marriage and parenthood, I couldn't shake the feeling that we no longer fit into her life as organically as before. It seemed that our relationship had faded into the background. When I expressed my concerns to her, expressing my disappointment and wondering why everything had changed so dramatically, she brushed off my worries, considering them an unnecessary reaction. She said that the unexpected combination of having a child and getting married had overloaded her, and she was trying to find a balance. In her opinion, I acted selfishly and inattentively, not understanding her point of view. Frustration was growing in me, and intuition made me accuse her of having an affair and hiding it. This accusation led to a strong and stormy quarrel between us. Despite her categorical denial, my suspicions continued to haunt me. Unable to get rid of the feeling of anxiety, I decided to check her phone while she was sleeping. To my relief, I didn't find any evidence of an affair, but I came across conversations with her colleagues discussing one prisoner they had a crush on. This discovery gave me a choice of what to do. It was risky to conflict with her about this, since I didn't want to seem overreacting or intruding into her personal life, especially since there was no concrete evidence of infidelity. Besides, I knew she would be furious if she found out that I was checking her messages without her knowledge. After discovering my wife's conversations with her colleagues and friends, I downplayed the content of the text messages, considering them to be just locker room conversations. I tried to rationalize this by imagining that a male correctional officer working in a women's prison could react in a similar way. Deep down, I've always known that my wife has a wayward nature and a curiosity to find new things. It occurred to me that this could be another of her studies, or perhaps even a new hobby that she is considering or already using. Intrigued and wanting to understand more, I decided to look into this issue. Trying to get to the bottom of the matter, I got access to her computer and began to study the history of visits. I found that she regularly deleted her browsing history, which led me to a dead end. But considering that in the past she had ex-boyfriends prone to aggression, I decided to turn to the materials about her previous partner for the first time. After making inquiries about him, I was surprised to learn that he was a prisoner in the prison where she worked. This discovery caused a wave of anxiety, and I felt a sudden anxiety and apprehension. It would seem that the innocent conversations in the locker room that my wife exchanged with colleagues at work began to take on a different meaning. Doubts crept into my head, and I wondered if she was in a romantic relationship with another prisoner, using her long working day as a cover. Trying to gather evidence and get to the truth, I quietly purchased a GPS device and installed it in her car. In the following months, our relationship began to improve. I noticed that there were significantly fewer calls from the babysitter, and my wife began to come home at the expected time. A GPS device installed to track her location confirmed that, apart from work, the only place she often goes was a bar with friends. Everything was fine, and I discreetly removed the GPS tracker from her car until she found it. I decided to relax my constant detective mode and drop the suspicion that she is having an affair. Gradually, I regained full confidence in her. Now fast forward to July 2021, when our son turned 2 years old, and then an unexpected event happened. She told me about her discomfort and desire to find another job, noting that her work in a correctional facility is becoming more stressful. Although I had a desire to ask her in more detail, I refrained because deep down I always wanted her to leave this job, and the fact that she met her ex when he was a prisoner only strengthened me in the correctness of her decision. It is noteworthy that the very next day she informed me that she had indeed resigned from her position. In the middle of the night, I woke up wanting to go to the toilet, but found that she wasn't in bed with me. Intrigued, I went into the living room, where I was greeted by the sound of her sorrowfully sobbing lips. Startled by my unexpected presence, she hastily wiped away her tears. Concerned about her well-being, I cautiously inquired about the cause of her disorder. Although she tried to hide her emotions, repeatedly repeating that nothing terrible was happening, I felt that something was bothering her a lot. It was obvious that she was struggling with some kind of problem that it was difficult for her to talk about. 2 days later, she announced that she had quit her job. When checking email on the website, the local news section caught my attention. The headline referred to an incident involving an inappropriate relationship between a prisoner and a correctional officer. Considering that my wife worked in this very prison as a correctional officer, and taking into account the local nature of the news, I could not resist clicking on the article. Unfortunately, neither the name of the correctional officer nor many specific details of the incident were reported in the message. As I delved into the news about a correctional officer who entered into an intimate relationship with a prisoner, it became obvious that the nature of their relationship was physical. The story said that the evidence was discovered during a random search of the cell. Unfortunately, the details are abruptly interrupted at this point. Interested, I went to the website of a local newspaper in the hope of finding additional information. There I came across an article in which it was told about the discovery of a prisoner's mobile phone, which, apparently, was connected with the unfolding scandal. When examining a mobile phone, shocking footage was found in which a correctional officer entered into illegal relations with several prisoners. In addition, candid photos of an employee were found. As a result, the employee was threatened with dismissal from her position and, in the future, criminal prosecution. There was no need to draw special conclusions to connect all the dots. When the employee got acquainted with the revealing report, she tearfully admitted that she had made a grave mistake and did not know that she was being recorded. To my horror, I came across evidence in the mobile phone of one of the prisoners, which testified that my wife had an intimate relationship with another prisoner. Her confession shocked me. She willingly and without further ado told the details, confessing that she had an affair with a prisoner who also forced her to enter into an intimate relationship with his cellmate. Memories of our previous breakup in 2017 surfaced in my mind, reminding me of her attachment to open relationships and group meetings. Her insistence on expanding boundaries and her history of dishonesty became apparent. Although I suspected that she was withholding some details, it didn't really matter anymore. What really struck me was her willingness to jeopardize everything for the sake of fleeting pleasure. Being a mother and a wife, she recklessly neglected her duties for the sake of illegal connections with prisoners. This behavior can be attributed to mental dependence, hybridophilia, that is, attraction to persons involved in criminal activity. It became obvious that she was in dire need of a comprehensive psychiatric examination. After her confession, I was at a loss and regretted my decision to reconcile with her. It was obvious that her underlying mental problems had surfaced, causing her considerable harm. My main concern has switched to the future of our 2-year-old son. Not knowing where to start, I asked her about the next steps. With tears in her eyes, she announced her intention to turn to a lawyer, realizing that she was facing imprisonment. The gravity of the situation made it incredibly difficult for her, and she did not stop crying throughout the confession. When I listened to her words, the scale of the betrayal was unfathomable, but the divorce did not immediately come to my mind. There was no time for tears or hasty actions, for example, to kick her out of the house. The impending possibility of her incarceration occupied all my thoughts, and first of all, they were focused on who would take care of our 2-year-old son. The idea that I would have to raise the baby alone seemed unbearable to me, and I turned to internet resources in search of information about her possible fate. I was disappointed to find out that she really faces a term of imprisonment. In the news, there were additional details about her relationship with several prisoners, which went beyond simple intimacy. It turned out that she was also involved in smuggling contraband items to them, for example, a cell phone. It is curious that in her confession to me, these important points were omitted. I persistently found out her motives, interrogating her daily why she was engaged in such activities. It is noteworthy that she did not receive material benefits from her actions. I believe that she got satisfaction from the perceived power and control of the prisoners over her. Her actions were truly amazing, but on reflection, we can say that all the signs were there, but they were cleverly hidden in plain sight of everyone. Her unconventional behavior and peculiar excesses were clear indicators. She even confessed during confession that she was fully aware of her wrongness. Nevertheless, she continued to stick to her addiction. It became clear that the history of her abusive relationships with past partners mattered, since I was the only exception, a normal presence in her dating history. I played a fatherly role in her life, consistently guiding her to a virtuous choice. Before resuming our relationship, she managed to convince me that she was actively striving for self-development and was looking for my influence in this positive direction. But apparently, the strain of parental responsibilities affected her, and she told about her relationship with the prisoner. Surprisingly, she claimed that this relationship began after the birth of our child. Doubt seized me, and I decided to take the necessary step to conduct a paternity test for our son. When I found out that the child was not biologically mine, I was seized with a deep feeling that I was being manipulated and betrayed. I devoted myself completely to this woman and her son, but this discovery destroyed me. The whole burden of responsibility for the welfare of the child fell solely on my shoulders, since I was a stable and reliable parental figure in his life. The following months turned into a nightmare for me. Eventually, she was charged and detained. Given the circumstances, I have made a firm decision to refrain from any participation in her defense. My main priority was my son, even though he is not my biological child. I'm the only parent he knows, and I just can't leave him. The situation was somewhat simplified when she was sentenced to prison in the following months. In order to avoid possible identification, I will refrain from divulging some details of this case. Fortunately, this story did not make national headlines, because at that time there were more significant events that attracted public attention. This incident became an important event in the local news and caused a stir for several weeks. It was never in my plans to overcome the difficulties of single fatherhood, especially in relation to a child who is not biologically mine. Ideally, I would prefer to distance myself from this situation and start all over again. But having a child significantly complicates the situation. In addition, my wife's parents live separately and she broke off all relations with them because of a traumatic upbringing. Therefore, they are not suitable to take responsibility for the upbringing of a child. Despite the fact that he is not my biological son, I have established a deep connection with him and intend to raise him as my own son. When the time comes, I will tell him the truth about his mother if necessary. But I think he won't see his mother soon.